disclaimer. And I will explain why we're starting with this disclaimer after I say it. So, guys, here is the disclaimer. All of the subject matter and the topics of this conversation that we are about to have are for entertainment purposes only. And that is your disclaimer. And of course, the reason why we're saying that is we all know the truth of that statement. And this is just to protect people like Don and I and every other podcaster out there, in the off chance that things decide to go south in the coming years when it comes to people like us. So, guys, too, I also want to welcome back to the show. It's been a while since he's been on. Don Rogers of the After Dark Show. What's up, man? This is going to be a great time.
Oh, I am just thrilled to be here. I'm happy to be back, Stephen, and I cannot thank you enough for setting this up. I just kind of shot my shot the one day while we were talking, and like, hey, do you think she would talk to me? I have, I think, 288 subscribers on YouTube now, so that's really not that big in comparison to a lot of people. And you were gracious enough to reach out to Sarah after your last show, and she was so generous to like even give me the time of day. And I am just stoked about this entire thing because she is one of the most esoterically brilliant people I think I've ever run across. And I know I kind of butchered that, but her intellect and her understanding of the reality that surrounds us is something I've never seen before. And
Oh,
it is
yeah,
just,
dude.
I'm just thrilled to be able to talk to her.
Oh, absolutely, man. And no problem, man, because my thing is this, like, at FKN, we're a team, and I see it that way. And when I'm part of a team, especially the what we're doing here, I want everybody to succeed, and I want all of us to succeed, and I want all of us to not only have the most amazing thought-provoking conversations we can possibly have, because that's what helps us digest and break through these experiences and these concepts that we're having. And on top of that, man, I don't gatekeep guests. I believe in sharing the love, man, especially to everybody on the network. For everybody just joining us, I saw a few more people just hopped in. Sarah will be joining us in 15 minutes. She's on the way home from an appointment. She'll be hopping in soon. But no, man, dude, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And that's just the Lion. What's up, bro? David is in the house. What's up, Dave? Good to see you here, man. Hell yes, hell yes. And we got Andrew in the house. He's excited for this one. So good to see everybody here. It's awesome to have all of you here. But no, man, and let me tell you something about Sarah. We were chatting about this before the show just a little bit. I uncovered Sarah about I want to say like 6 years ago. And I remember I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this woman basically break down and explain these esoteric concepts that I had been studying for the better part of a decade at that point. And she starts breaking them down at like almost a fifth grade reading level. And I'm like sitting there with my jaw agape, like, holy shit. Like, she explained that and broke that down, better than I ever could have. And I was just, and I became a fan after that. And then I, remember it was during the first season of the podcast, season 1 of BG Cast. I was I reached out to anybody and everybody. I was going full throttle. Like I was reaching out to Joe Rogan. I was I didn't give a damn. Like I was like, I wanted everybody and anybody on, man, because that's where I was. And that was the mentality I had in the beginning with the show. My mentality has changed though throughout the end of season 1 and season 2. But I remember Sarah, I emailed her, I shot my shot, and she decided to come on, man. And the first time I had her on, I was definitely fanboying a little bit. So I'm glad I got that out of my system. But you know, and now like this will be your fourth time coming on the show, and this is your first time sitting down with her. And I know she's been on Rob Khalil's show before too. And you know, and so it's kind of interesting, and to me that just showcases the kind of human being that she is. Like, you know, despite, you know, where she is and what she's doing, she still takes time to sit down and chat with the community, you know, and the people who look to her, you know. And you know, one thing I was saying, like I said, you know, before we started the show and you and I were chatting, you know, like, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, like, you know, or in any other way aside from what it is, but like a lot of the people I used to listen to, like throughout the years, you know, who contributed to my evolution in a lot of ways, you know, I can't take anything from them anymore. And it's not like it's not a bad thing. It's just that now, like, you know, their information is no longer part of my path. It's just, it is what it is. But, you know, and it seems like they've kind of stayed where they have always been throughout the years. And, you know, Sarah, though, dude, I've seen her evolve. I've seen her grow. I can always take something away from one of her videos. And you know, even if it's something I think I've studied pretty deeply, you know, I always take something away, man. And that's a beautiful thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll give it to the audience or the listeners as well. The part that I said right after that is how I actually came upon you and then Sarah, because my wife, Canadian Spinja, she she is my buffer filter because I have ADD. It's insane, and I can't pay attention to one thing for too long because it just messes with me. She tells me the ones I need to listen to, and your name came up, and she's like, "You need to listen to this guy." And she looked at me and she went, "No, you need to talk to him." No, what? And I listened to a couple of your episodes, and then I just approached you and I was like, "Hey, you and I have a lot in common, want to shoot the shit," kind of thing. Right. And we literally kind of started our friendship there. And then I saw your episodes with Sarah, and thank God she is the way she is, because
Mhm.
the fifth grade reading level approach works for me in my level of spiritual awakening, I guess, because like I literally just kind of snapped online last year. So I kind of need the four dummies for a lot of things. Now, her videos aren't simplistic in any way. They actually have a wide range of like, you'll either get it, you'll get it to here, and then maybe this isn't for you and you'll get that later. But the span of her videos is just, there's always something, like you said, there's always something you can take away. And then if you watch it again, you'll probably get something else.
Oh, agreed, man, agreed. And you know, like there's not many people that I you know talk this way about. You know, like it's not there's I guess the best way I can phrase it, and the best way I can put it is like, you know, she out of anybody I've listened to, you know, as far as podcasts, as far as like any independent researcher, any indie journalist or anything like that. Um, Even when it comes to these esoteric concepts that, you know, we discuss and that, you know, we practice in our everyday lives. I mean, there's not many people that, you know, I can talk so highly about. I mean, like I was telling you in the beginning, you know, I can't really say anything bad about any of my guests, but you know, Sarah's done a lot for this community. She truly has. And not only has she done a lot for this community, I mean, she sits down and talks to the community. I mean, she's not like a lot of these other bigger, you know, well-known spiritual podcasters who have kind of grown egos, or you know, a lot of these other people, you know, who are like really high up in the spiritual community and on like Gaia TV or you know things like that. I've noticed that you know, egotism seems to kind of encroach upon these individuals. I mean, it's something that, you know, we talk about in the, you know, the spiritual evolution or the spiritual spiral. You know, I don't call it a path because it's never ending and it's always a work in progress. But when we're on this spiritual evolution, we're supposed to be, putting the ego in its place, not letting it run rampant. So, like, and that's something I've seen with a lot of other people who get really high up in the spiritual community. And they seem to disregard those teachings. They seem to kind of cast them aside. And the love of money and the love of fame and the love of notoriety look what happened to David Wilcock. Like he, in the beginning, I know he blocked me on X, and that's okay, because I'm not going to lie, he's become a very vehemently shitty person at this point. But back in the heyday when Gaia TV was Gaiam TV, back in like 2011, 2012. I'm showing my age here because this is how long I've been paying attention at this point. He was doing really good things. Like, he was actually educating people. He was, like breaking down these esoteric concepts, like, really big into sacred geometry and things like that. And then I just watched kind of like the fall over the years of him, man. And I remember I was watching one of his shows back in like 2016. And I was like listening to him, and I'm like, dude, what has happened to this guy? Like, what's going on here? And he's not the first one, man. But like, that's something that I try to, because I've talked with you about this before. I try to come up here and I try to be an example, as do you, Don. And when I'm up here, I'm representing the community. You know what I mean? I'm a face for the community, and I want everybody, to feel like they can come and listen to me and they can come talk to me, because I'm not better than anybody else here. I'm in the same boat as everybody else. I really am. Like, I might have, had a little bit more years when it comes to, researching and things like that. But man, I just got ideas and theories, like, just like we all do. And that's kind of where I will always stay humble. And that's just kind of where it comes from.
Yeah, I can really understand that, because like myself, and I don't even know where I picked this up, but I'm not going to credit myself with it, is I have a current understanding of a lot of things. Like, that's where I prefer to stay, because I think something you alluded to as well, when people stop resonating with you, a lot of the times it's because they stagnate or they've hit their ceiling and they've kind of arced out, and it's like, okay, that's nice, but what else? Right? And if you don't have that what else, you stop growing, you just kind of stay there. And I never just want to stay anywhere ever again. Like, I want to keep learning, I want to keep understanding, I want to keep looking at different aspects of the way this reality works, right? Because I believe that's why I was nudged awake. Like, hey, like, I was having a very successful 9 to 5 life after me and the family moved across the country. I had settled into the Canadian dream of, a well-paying job that I don't mind doing. And then all of a sudden wake up and it's like, oh my God, there's a lot more going on around me. And it's just been one thing after the other. And I truly hope that everybody craves to learn what's going on around them the way it's hit me.
Oh, of course, man. And like, I'm with you guys. So everybody, I see we just got some new people in. Sarah's going to be joining us in like 4 minutes, so just hang tight. But no, I am with the Lion says a successful 9 to 5 is not in the cards for the chosen ones, and I would agree. I would agree with that, man. The 9 to 5 thing is, I'm doing it right now, and I've gotten into a better 9 to 5 at this point, but I am waiting patiently for the day I can leave it in the dust and walk the fuck away from it, man. But no, same thing, man. I think a lot of people, when you don't resonate, it's one of two things. Either they become stagnant, or you're approaching a frequency they're not just quite ready for yet. Or the other thing is like potentially they've evolved also too, and they're looking other places, So I know, like, I'm a very Eastern guy. I can't say that enough. The Eastern mysticism has always just profoundly resonated with me a lot more. So I know it's a little bit more simplistic than a lot of Western mysticism, but at the same time, like, it's what resonates with me, man. And it's just how, the approach that I feel that is right for me. And of course, everybody's got their own different, and that's the beautiful thing about it, though, man. And like, we all have something to take from many different things. I mean, I have no problem with, like, Gurdjieff, Fourth Way, Rudolf Steiner, things like that. I think it's great stuff. I think it's definitely worth a read. But I hold the Bhagavad Gita just real close to my heart. And that's just it's one of my faves. I mean, I have the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, which is probably going to take me still. Like, I haven't even finished the first volume yet, and it's a volume. It's like 12 books, and they're all the size of like a Lord of the Rings book. So I have a ways to go. Yeah, I have a ways to go. But I mean, I think that's the beauty in this, man. And that's what's cool, is that, and I one of the best things is we all really are kind of our own little universe. We're all this um subjective focal point of this defined consciousness, having this, or as Sarah puts it, and we're going to talk about this when she comes on, we're this current, this individual current in this sea of consciousness. Man, that is just oof, dude. It's so good.
Oh,
um and hold on, we got one thing from Lion real quick. He said, in this journey I have met a lot of people that had a piece of something that I needed to learn or grow, but there were other areas they seemed to be sorely lacking. I'm sure you agree with that too, Don.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It does. It just, there always seems to be like this high point of like, oh, this person's fascinating, but it's like, oh, but I don't enjoy this part of them. So it really is about discernment, though. You really just take what you need of people, kind of like what the Lion's saying. And that's part of your own toolkit, your own building block. Like, it's not as though you're discarding the person. It's like, I put it as, I have files on people. I know
Mhm.
there's certain subjects I avoid with certain people because I know where the conversation is going to go. Right. And
Exactly.
it's not pleasurable for me. So I just avoid it. Right. And I don't think I'm being manipulative. I think it's just a good way to be able to communicate with a lot of different people.
I would agree. I would agree. And I noticed kind of everybody's in their, as Chris puts it, everybody is where they need to be, at this point in time with their level of awareness. And, we have to have compassion and understanding for that. And I know that's easier said than done, with a lot of things, because, we look at the vast majority of the conscious collective um, at this point in time. And there's still a lot of people who are still at, like, the very surface level of it. And that's okay. I mean, eventually, what will happen is they will move forward to, oh, she's here. You guys ready? All
Oh,
righty,
yeah.
guys. She is in the waiting room. I'm about to pop her on. It's good to see her face again. And guys, let me give her a proper intro. She's been on this show 3 other times before. This is Don's first time sitting down with her. And I have probably, I would call her one of the most down home human beings I've ever met in my whole life. She is a amazing person, and she has not only lended a lot to my spiritual evolution. I'm sure she has lended so much to other people's spiritual evolutions as well. And I'm really looking forward to having her back on. Mrs. Sarah, what is up?
Hi, how are you guys?
Good, good. It's good to see your face. How's everything going?
Yeah, it's going great. Thank you guys so much for being patient with me while I was getting home. I recently got a partial tongue tie release. So I don't know if you guys are aware of what that even means.
I'm not. Yeah, why don't you enlighten us a little bit?
Well, I didn't even know what a tongue tie was a year ago today. So I found out this year that I had a severe tongue tie and that it could be the reason why I have a lot of chronic neck tension. So it was worth a lot of the cons that come with the surgery. It's a minor
Mhm.
surgery, but it's basically just, relearning speech.
Okay. It sounds a little tedious. I can definitely imagine.
That I already knew that going into it though. So I was like, well, I relearned a lot of stuff. I could probably relearn speech.
You do, yeah. I can imagine, man. That's like I get anything with the mouth. That I got to give you credit for that. It's always funky when you have to have people prodding around in your mouth and messing with your what you project your frequency with into this world.
Yeah. So now I'm going to be able, after I recover from it and repair my speech, to be able to be more comfortable in my spacesuit here.
we all get tired of wearing them sometimes, and sometimes we gotta take them off. But no, thank you for no worries. And I didn't want you doing an interview. Don didn't want you doing an interview either in your car. We want you to get here safe, and we want you to be able to focus and kind of hone in with us. So since this is Don's first time speaking with you, I'm going to let him lead off with a couple of questions he has for you. I have some things I want to touch on from our last conversation I had you on and some expansion, and I have some questions about your newer shows. But Don, why don't you take the lead?
Yeah, I just want to start off on a personal note. I was saying to the listeners earlier, Sarah, your videos and your channel have been such a huge part of my spiritual awakening. I just sort of clicked online last fall, and it's been this trail that my wife, Canadian Spinger, that's her screen name, has kind of like, hey, listen to this person and listen to this person. And then I listened to Steven, and then I listened to you. And the parallels of the two were just kind of funny because my wife often says, you should listen to this person. And when she found Steven, she said, you should talk to him. And within weeks, I actually was. And I continued to watch his shows. And then the second video of yours I saw, I was like, I need to speak to this woman because your concepts have just resonated and helped my own spiritual awakening so much that I cannot thank you enough for what you do.
That is the most fulfilling thing that thank you for that.
Yeah, sorry, that was my fanboy moment. So I will move on because I do have a very heavy question, and it's one that actually came to me from watching your videos, and I actually wrote it down, and that's a thing in our house. If you get the notebook, it was big, right? So my question is, am I understanding correctly that this plane of existence is populated by an infinitesimal number of sentient molecules that are influenced or observed by a higher stage of consciousness that creates our reality?
That's not cryptic. Did you say infinite or finite amount of sentient molecules?
Like infinite, because it actually came to me while I was looking into the holographic universe principle, and how I got there is all of the molecules here on Earth are sentient. I'm sure you have looked at the dual wave experiment, right? And that's when I saw you on Rob Kal-El's show, and you were talking about a higher light source of consciousness affecting reality. And I was wondering if it's that light source consciousness observing this reality that creates it.
So, yeah. So observation is a funny thing because, okay, so first of all, not that I care whatever modern physics is doing, but physics just came out and said, hey, you know that thing about a hologram? Yeah, it's back in style now. So now they're reapproving it. It's just because spirituality is kicking their ass. We're like light years ahead of them. So now they're like, oh, they're making us look bad. So now I heard Sabine Hossenfeld, which is like the leading YouTube, I guess, authority on physics. I only say that based off of her numbers, like huge numbers. So she was describing fractals without saying fractals for 8 minutes. I'm like, like, don't even listen to them. Whatever. Yeah. So back to your question, the light source being in like a dual state. And then I'm assuming why you brought that up was like when I said in my latest video, the thing about it's not the observer that collapses the waveform, it's frequency. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Roger Penrose, another physicist, came forth and was like, it's not the observer that collapses the waveform. And I think that a lot of the spiritual physicists of the they've been saying that, or they've been proving that. So once again, the mainstream physicists are saying things that are the spiritual field is, first saying, and then they're mirroring it. So what that's based off of is like the observer is when you try to rectify an observer, like a singular observer collapsing the wave function, it doesn't quite add up because the things that we're looking at and calling interference patterns, that's just a paradigm we're seeing them from if we don't have a larger model to kind of understand what we're actually seeing them through. So that's why they were like, wow, this one thing goes through here, and then this other thing goes through here, and then it creates a picture. The interference patterns create a picture. And so a better model that I think Nassim Haramein.
Yeah, Nassim. It's been a while since I've heard his name.
Yeah, well, he's doing things that are highly of like not just testing at the moment. He's like writing papers on all of his discoveries and stuff. And so I believe it was Max Planck who talked about the unified field of consciousness. I don't know who, because when I started saying that in my videos 2 years ago, I thought it was just a part of our collective memory. I was pulling it from a collective memory bank. But if we had to trace it back to who coined it, I do believe it was Max Planck. But anyways, Nassim's a huge fan, or a huge student even, of Max's work. And so he also is applying the unified field of consciousness in a way that is very, very dignified. It's the opposite of how the spiritual community gets called, vague New Agers that don't have any research behind their belt. And so because of that, I can reconcile the fact of there not being an actual observer if we're looking at observer from a different context. And that's basically what you're saying. You're saying, well, if there's a larger, or we could call source light observer, rather than the singular observer, because the singular observer here is not the one collapsing the wave function. I threw in my 2 cents in my latest video, the Mandela effect. And I said, well, it's freaky. I never thought it was the observer. It's the observer beforehand opting into a construct or a density. And then from there, that density already has specific, functions, laws, parameters to it. So it's not us collapsing it.
No, I'm with you. And because what that brings to me is you're absolutely right. It's like, a lot of physicists, they're looking at a duck right now and they want to call it a goose. And that's kind of the best way I put it, because I mean, I brought this up on the show last time, but panpsychism is their attempt at, trying to not make it look like we've been, I don't want to say beating them out when it comes to the information, but I think that it's very interesting because now it's funny because panpsychism is one of the most hated theories in quantum physics at this point in time, because that takes our place here in the universe. I mean, we look at the current narrative, that we're just floating on this tiny blue rock out in this abyss, which I'm not disagreeing with. And our existence is coincidental, and it's meaningless. But with panpsychism, because if consciousness is what I would call the prime fundamental of this existence, that, we have the implicate, which is the observer that's within, and then the explicate, which is the perceived physical existence, that takes our place of being in the universe, going from coincidence to absolutely necessary. at that point. The universe is experiencing itself. The divine is experiencing itself through us. And I'm gonna, we're those, as you said in that video, the esoteric concept of the soul. We are these singular currents in this sea of consciousness. And that was so well put. But do you think eventually at some point, since we kind of segued into this topic, do you think maybe eventually they're going to come to the realization that they've been looking at a duck all along and calling it a goose?
Well, I actually think that there's a lot of genuine obstructions intentionally going on.
Mm.
I know that that's not going to be groundbreaking for you two to kind of wrap your heads around. And that's not something that's even groundbreaking for me to come to that conclusion, but it really got put into perspective more so than anything with string theory. String theory being absolutely crazy, just bazonkers.
Mm-hmm.
And it really makes a person who's genuine about becoming sovereign have to see through the veneer of academia. It's a veneer. What is it's psycho. What they mock, what they exalt, what they put on a pedestal, what they diminish, it doesn't matter. Like it's like vomit doesn't matter. So because of that type of because of that level of obstructions that are put in a way, I heard one interdisciplinary, Jason Reza Georgiani. I heard him, I believe, in a podcast with Danny Jones. That podcast was on fire if you want to go watch it. And in that, he was talking about how basically these large, like red herrings get thrown. And they will set you off not for like a month or two, not for a week. They will set the course of science and physics and quantum mechanics off for like decades, longer than decades. And think about that also reconciled with the fact that like, how long does it take for the truth to catch up to a lie? So you have on top of this genuine things where it's just a matter of now becoming our own authorities, creating our own platforms, not waiting for any of the validation from academia or any, mainstream authority, even the ones who I was just talking about now and their large following. I genuinely feel like Roger Penrose is a genius, and I have nothing against Sabine Hossenfind, nothing against her. I just would not look ever to external mainstream science for what mysticism does best. And so they'll just be mocking concepts and none of them really are even spiritually sovereign. I'm not talking about Penrose now. I'm just talking about academia in general. They're not sovereign. When I hear these people who are even put in like genius categories talk about these things, they're talking about them in idiotic parameters, like really stupid ones. Like if you actually were if you walked with them, you'd walk for lifetimes. I fell asleep on something and then I looked back and it was a new thing, and it was like them fighting, like these really, really intelligent, smart people, the head of their fields at this huge conference, fighting over it, if there's possibly a fourth dimension, and that there's no such thing, no proof of anything beyond that. Like don't hold your breath for these really smart people, because they're not very smart. But we know that. I wanted to really answer your question, Dawn, earlier. So what is it that you were saying? You were saying like a higher source light observer. Let's get back to that. And then what was the question?
Is that what basically creates our reality on this plane? Is the information coming from that source stream?
Oh. See, because mysticism has all these different words, and then when I share them, I get called word salad, but it's not. At a certain point of reality, you can only start calling things emanations. Emanations, rays. So there's always some sort of primordial splitting. And in alchemy, that would also be like a part of the light being created through densities. So when it comes to this like original light source, then at that point, there's so many different ways to look at it. And I could like be here this whole time telling you different narratives that I get about that. For instance, I get for a long time that this is just a universe of light and that there's universes beyond this one that aren't light based, but that this one is light based. And that like really hurts a lot of people's brains or like makes them
Mhm.
triggers them and stuff. And I'm not here with the Bible about it. That's just what I get. So it's really at that point something where we should open ourselves up to there being not just more than one objective truth about that question, because that's a large question. You start off right away with like the largest question ever. But then on top of that, to narrow that in more. So like them being multiple truths, but also that being like light itself could be the way that this universe wants to explore one facet, just like how a crystal has a facet, it wants to explore one facet of its own nature. So the multiverse has all these different natures, and then it goes, whoa, 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 let's see that universe. And we're just exploring the heck out of this one facet of light. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so we're like in it and we're understanding all the nature of light and we're understanding the laws of light. So the laws of light would be like cause and effect. Light creates a shadow. Light creates polarity. It creates duality. It creates, these things. And like we're just like in light until we master light. And then we're like, okay, like we understand all what it would be to explore and be and know thyself through light. So that would be like the most largest or metaphysical answer I could give you. I could give you easier ones, but I want to like keep it at the most heightened, expanded level. I could easily give you right now like Theosophical take on it, or like or any mystery school. But I like this one because I'm really into like neo-Gnosticism right now, which kind of just turns the tables on everything before it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. No, and I mean, that's we always enjoy your answers here, sir. I remember you last time saying, that you don't answer a question directly sometimes, but honestly, I love it though. Like, I mean, it's fascinating just to hear you speak. So, one of the questions I have for you is actually on your video about the falling and the fall. And I think it was very beautifully explained, and it was interesting because I heard little things from like our previous conversations we've had on this channel in that video, and I thought that was super cool. And one of the biggest things I think that you nailed down is you took a step outside of the dualistic box when describing the fall, and on how the fall can actually be a beneficial thing for us in our development to kind of redeem ourselves, that redemption path. So if you don't mind just elaborating a little, because I still think a lot of people have especially a lot of people in our community have this negative connotation of the fall. They think it is one of the worst things that happen. So if you don't mind just elaborating a little on why the fall is kind of a good thing for us, and when it comes to our development and in our understanding, on our spiritual evolution, that would be great, because the way I think you phrased it, I mean, I think we can all take something from that and apply it to our own experience right now as well.
So I'm gonna once again go out on a really like intense limb here and say that what I personally feel, because a lot of times, more times than not, I don't feel called to actually share my inside Sarah's head's truth. Instead, I get called to share the largest beneficial truth that I can enhance light on So I did that in the fall video towards like, ooh, let's enhance light towards like what exactly a fall would even be. But in
Mhm.
my opinion, I'd go one step further and say that this is going to sound super Gnostic. At the moment, and moments change, I genuinely think that if life has to support life through consuming other life, that's a fallen reality.
I would agree.
And I still do. I eat, but I think that I I don't care how somebody wants to call this reality. Like, oh no, it's just that's we're in a reality of an ecosystem or whatever you want to call to justify it. Like, yeah, we're in contrast. We're heavy in contrast. Like, I just genuinely feel, even though this isn't in a system, I genuinely feel that there's realities that can totally exist and they can still have contrast and you could still learn from them and they could still play out highs and lows, and that you can still not have to literally consume other life, and not just us. Like, everything doesn't
Mm.
need to consume. It could be in an upward spiral instead of a downward spiral.
Mhm. Totally understood on that. And I mean, when we look at, we can see almost some of that, because you explained it perfectly in there. What it means for a fall is that instead of this equivalent energetic exchange, sharing this equivalent energetic exchange with other beings, the fall is to gain this nourishment. And how you describe nourishment, I think, was really good, because when we think about nourishment, we think of very physical things. We think of food, shelter, but nourishment, as far as our spiritual sustenance, is something that also comes into play as well. So there's a question from a viewer, if you don't mind, real quick, Sarah. So we have
After we take this, I'm still going to answer the other part of your question because I love talking about the fall.
Because that's the same thing. That's something you and I we have a similarity in that, and we've talked about the whole sleight of hand before, and that's definitely going to come up in this. But Miss Canadian Spin just says, so does it mean if you have to force yourself to eat, you are possibly on the right path? It's
That's not always a sign. That can be a sign, but that's not always a sign. For instance, if a person has a large parasite load in them, that will make them not hungry. And then people think that usually, like, if you have a large parasite load, that means that you're like bigger. Half the time, if you're emaciated or if you're skinnier, that's also. So it's like extremes. It's like you don't have an appetite. Oh, that's a large sign of parasites. So if you're forcing yourself to eat, that can be so many different things, because also when the body's going through upgrades, food changes drastically, as well as how much you want to eat them and stuff. So what that always points to, because it points to too many things, but something that it all has in common, so it could be looked at there, is your endocrine system needs support. Your HPA axis needs support. And that's not, we're even talking about if this is the best thing possible. So let's say everything that I said about parasites is not relevant. Let's say that this person asking the question genuinely doesn't feel like eating, probably went through massive expansion. Physical body doesn't really feel at the moment like the energy and resources need to go there, wants to put that energy into the expansion and the upgrade it's receiving. So kind of just like how we ourselves will, our physical body will resource things differently, so like the autonomic nervous system takes care of everything that we're not supposed to be aware of. If we were aware of all of the different things that the autonomic function nervous system takes care of for us, we could not do what we're doing. So just like that, to give you a best case scenario, the body might be like, all right, you go high, fam. like it might be resourcing that energy somewhere else, so that temporarily you're not really hungry. That's the body's way right now of organizing that.
Very good answer. And Canadian Spin just said thank you for sure for taking the time to answer that. And like, yeah, no, the fall's just, you know, we've talked about this we've talked about this in a couple of the past times you've been here. And you know, I brought up last time because that was something cool you brought up in your video on, you know, how when we're talking about the Garden of Eden and the false singularity. I think you worded that very well because that's at least in my opinion, you know, what we were kind of trapped in. But I liked how you did that little homage to Christ potentially, getting Adam and Eve to eat from that tree out of the secret book of John. I definitely loved that, and you know, I think that's, you know, something that brings a bigger question to the table, you know. And I mean, is Christ truly that when we think of Christ during that, like, let's say if Christ really did speak to Adam and Eve, was this Christ energy? Because I've heard you say before that the Christ energy is the liberator of the demiurge. Am I correct?
Yeah.
The liberator from the demiurge. I'll correct myself there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that middle pillar. Did you want me to talk, or did you?
Oh yeah, yeah. Go right ahead. Yeah.
I did it.
No, you're good.
Yeah. So one of the banes of my existence, but also I don't see it changing at the moment, is when I'm giving my teachings, they're it'll almost like slow the roll if I go too much into too many different things. And if that was the point of that video particularly, then that's great. But mostly I'm usually just using something like, well, here's the backstory. And if you didn't have it, you won't have it here, but you'll get one sentence from me. But it's really like to talk about the main thing. And then a lot of the times the small side things I say to kind of just construct the point that I'm really trying to make end up becoming the lead character, and they want their own movie. In the comments, people go, whoa, what did you just say about Christ as a trickster or Sophia? Like, people became fascinated with that one thing that I pulled from Gnosticism. So then I went, shit, I didn't say it right. Because really, even the secret book of John, that's a Sethian text. So Seth, which is Adam's son, is like the Christ figure in the Sethian branch of Gnosticism. Mm-hmm. Seth is the savior. Seth is the hero arc. But how the hell would I be able to sum that up while I'm trying to talk about another point to my eye? Where you go like, with the Sethian, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, well, I made an executive decision. And I'm like, well, Sethian energy is still Christ consciousness. It's not Christ, but he's running Christ. They just put him under the name that Sethian is the hero there. So there's muddy waters that I'm going to at some point have to figure out how to construct better. But in the meantime, to answer the thing larger about the creation story, I'm assuming since your audience specifically is probably not Christian, and if they're anything, probably more Gnostic, is the reason why they consider the fall negative. It's because they're not talking about like how Sophia breathed pneuma into them. Rather, they're talking about the original fall, like how the demiurge was even constructed in the first place, correct?
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm hitting at, because, you know, if we look at you know, that creation myth in the secret book of John, I mean, we had the original heavenly humans. We had the heavenly Adam and the heavenly Eve that were created in the pleroma. And then what had happened was when Yaldabaoth was cast down to this realm, him and his archons, if I'm correct, actually made a human earthly Adam. And then, yeah, like you were saying, Sophia came down from the pleroma and breathed the pneuma into them. That was kind of like the agreement, or some kind of weird agreement that I don't even know if it was an agreement. I mean, when I look at that book, I mean, it seems like potentially it was out of compassion for what was going on. That's kind of my my take on it, at least. But yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. They see that original fall as a negative thing.
Yeah. And You know, when I was talking about the fall, I felt called to really juxtapose it when I was juxtaposing it with the Christian fall. I felt called to point to the to, to the coordinates of the Gnostic fall, where the backstory of the pleroma and that was not where on my timeline of the movie I decided to like start the fall. So I lined up the Christian fall with what now we can just coin the second fall in Gnosticism, which was which was God's spark now having free will. So that's where I meant the fall. I meant how Sophia tricked, and you know, like it's always some sort of in Gnosticism, the trickster's divine.
Mhm.
You know, you like Yeshua in some of the texts is a spirit that comes in, says something profound, and then laughs as he disappears. Tell me that's not a trickster. Someone leaves profane and profound at the same time and then vanishes. So so in the Gnostic way of it, like the serpent's not, as you know, is not a bad guy at all. And
Mhm.
so the serpent being the one that is like, all right, well, I will shapeshift into this, which is trick. That's why I'm calling Sophia trickster, or whoever the shapeshifter,
Mhm.
a trickster, but trickster in the positive sense of wanting to trick Yaldabaoth into giving them spirit or pneuma, so that then now they're realizing they're in that singularity, that, you know, because she had compassion for the fact that they were being enslaved.
Mhm.
So she's like, I have to rectify this. And
Mhm.
so the rectification was a second fall, one where you become aware of the predicament and you learn through a redemption arc how to ascend.
And no, and I thank you for emphasizing on that. And it's very interesting, you know. And I also liked how you said mysticism has no chill, because you're absolutely right about that. And just like the universe has no chill. But thank you for answering that, Sarah. I appreciate it. Don, let's hear your next question.
Okay. This one actually came from Canadian Spinges. So, well, it was born by her. How do we, you mentioned being a pilot earlier. How do we as pilots better communicate with our vessels? Right? Just on a base level, like I understand that I'm a conscious being in a human vessel. How do I better communicate with my vessel to like let it know I have its best intention?
Through your heart. See, my clients get to see my softer side, and so do the people who come to my in-person events. I don't know what people want me to do. I don't know what they want me to do. I'm vulnerable in my podcast, but I'm not gonna make a video where I'm like, you guys, it's not the Sarah show. If I'm teaching the way I would want to be taught. So because of that, sometimes I come off, I guess people only see that dimension of me in the teacher mode. No, no, you should see me behind the scenes. I speak to my heart. I speak to, like, I'm my inner child gets whatever she wants. If she wants me to validate that someone didn't treat her right, I don't sit there and try to make her an adult. And oh, by the way, I'm talking about inner child because you could look at the visceral body as
Mhm.
just a recorder. The visceral body records things. So even if we're like we're so on it, right? We're like mental ninjas. The visceral body, the one that is, you know, like deep fatty adipose tissue, ooh, instinctual. That body does not care whatever's going on in the mind. That body is like a judge, but like a child judge, going like, they did that to me, they da 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 and da da da. So I speak to the body, the somatic, the visceral body, the emotional body, the subconscious, the intuitive body through the heart center. You could really do this to any part, any layer or sheath that you wish to. So if you're like, whoa, you made this way too like somatic. I was more talking about it from like a cellular perspective. You could still talk to your cellular body this way too. But you do it through the heart. and then you send it whatever you want. But if you ask me, I would say before sending anything, it would be receiving it. So it'd be like, what would you like me to validate about your experience? Because honestly, the greatest upgrades I've got was actually through dissolving. I mean, that's, you guys are smart. So I know when I'm being profound and I know when I'm not. So I know that that was not profound, but it's through that opposite of play. Like the dissolving will allow the preparation for the activations. So that dissolving, it's like, well, then how do we dissolve if that's so powerful and activating a lot of the things? But you act like you are a hostage and you'll validate anything your heart is calling you to receive. It's more like, how much can you be open to me? That's like that's the game going on here. It's like the game is egoless.
Mm-hmm.
The game is how can I just be receptive of what's going on? Now, if we want to look at this, like I said, not from such a somatic emotional lens, we could still benefit from this process, even if we're looking at it from the heart center is the portal. It's the primary portal. There's several other portals, but the heart center is the primary portal. So if you want to do, you didn't say cellular body, but what exactly was your wording?
Just like general health and stuff. Like if you can almost like self Reiki, just telling yourself like, it's okay, I'm going to be okay. Like I've had several traumatic injuries through my life and I've tried to heal them myself, and I've like gone off of all pharmaceutical medication and done so of my own free will. And I think a lot of it is just by the way I talk to myself, because it's like, no, we're okay, we're stronger than this. And I like, is that how that kind of works? Like you can literally talk yourself and tell yourself that it's okay and you love yourself. Like,
oh yeah, okay, so you were talking more like about what I was talking about, like somatic
yeah.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to tune in because I don't have anxiety in the same way that I can feel that you're talking about it. So I'm trying to like find a bridge to kind of like explain it. What did give me anxiety in the way that you're talking about it is when I used to eat like yogurt and meat, and I am paleo again, but there was a specific time of my awakening when I was not jiving at all with the food choices I was making, and it made me very anxious. I'd start going into like, oh my God, my loved ones are going to die, or like just things like that. So also make sure that your diet, like if you track it to, I'm having this episode and I never linked it to I eat bread, or I never linked it to once I start eating this, whatever it is, that's when I start getting a lot of neuroinflammation. So make sure that you're also on top of the spiritual things you're doing, looking for ways to extinguish neural inflammation, because that's a really tight feedback loop, meaning it doesn't give a lot of leeway once it gets into motion. So once a neuroinflammation feedback loop starts, I'm not saying it's hard to stop, because it's not hard, but we would have to know how, because on automatic, it will go into destruction. And then we'll think that it's some sort of other thing. Like, for instance, the reason I was late today, who knows, maybe this is good that I was late to tell you guys this. I go to my homeopathist once a month, and he's also my crystal dealer. He's amazing.
That's so cool. That's so awesome.
Yeah. And he has this whole crystal showroom. And so when he showed it to me a year ago, I was like, oh my God, you have all these crystals. He's like, yeah, I couldn't store them at my house anymore, and I needed to get them off of my hands. No, he buys new ones every month. So I found out that wasn't true. I kept going like, hey, I'm helping you move these. I'm promoting that. Like, what? He's an addict. We're all addicts.
Was it that meme? Was it you that posted it where it's like, he's like, I'm not going to buy any more crystals, and he's looking at himself in the mirror and he's like, yes, you are. You're going to go buy some more crystals.
That was more like if we had to be a direct projection, that was more like me at his place. Like me buying crystals from him. But he's also a very powerful homeopath. And sure more, but we'll just call him a homeopath. And he gives droppers for specific types of crystals at a medicinal level. And he was like, oh, my research led me to find a new way that demonic parasites hide in our field. Do you want me to test you? I was like, you bet your ass I want you to test me.
Dude, yes, I'm interested now.
Yeah, apparently I had a lot of them. So that's another reason I will be making, it was on the list, but I'm going to move it up higher on the list, the video on targeted individuals, because that concept is true. And me and him have been doing our own little research together where he's using me as the guinea pig, but that's great because I'm sure that was a part of our soul contract. It's not burdening him at all. He was waiting to find out stuff like this about somebody, and I'm the perfect candidate. But he's been testing me and stuff. And so basically, I forget the name of the crystal he gave me, but that helps dissolve the sheaths. But it's inevitable. If you put yourself in a visible light and you're doing any form of light work, then there's things that no matter how much your frequency is high, or no matter how much your heart's open, or no matter how much there's certain conditions, it's like it's that one saying, if you call on the flames, you will be burned, or something like that.
Well, it's interesting that you said, because I totally agree with you. Because I myself, I joke I've been interdimensionally jumped before. It's definitely happened, and they were reptilians, and they I guess that day was the day that they decided they wanted to do that. And but because I was telling you I do Kriya yoga, and
Yeah.
I ended up alchemizing them off of me. I ended up and it was just so bizarre, because when I finally got them off of me, I saw this streak of my energy go with them that they were feeding off of. So no, I want to touch a little bit more on the TI thing, because I think that's something, the targeted individual thing, because I think that's something that we don't have a lot of clarification on. But I did want to say one thing about your teacher mode, because when I was looking at the esoteric definition of the soul and spirit, where you were talking about Buddhism and alchemy complement each other, because I said so. And then that definitely made me chuckle, because I was like, because of all the times I've spoken with you before, and I'm like, yeah, that was definitely teacher mode. That was teacher mode coming out right there. And but no, let's talk about targeted individuals just a little bit, because I think this is something that needs clarification, because there's a lot of people who try to discount this. And at the same time, there's a lot of people who are experiencing very weird and bizarre things, in their own subjective, I call it the subjective stage, or subjective part of the experience. So, I mean, in your kind of terms, like, how would you describe what a targeted individual is? I mean, we talked about demonic parasites, yes, but do you feel that potentially, intelligence agencies can get involved on this kind of behavior as well?
Yeah, they do. That's why, like, I just pay all my taxes. I paid $10 more, just do all that, so I could just do what I want. Like, it's like it's so clean. It's like, look, just let me talk about this, and you will get your crystal money. Yeah, like they're perhaps the greatest theatrical trick this age ever made was turning the CIA into making them cool. I see reels all the time. It's like, oh, the CIA agent's gonna tell you how to spot what? Spot what? A reptilian? No. How to spot what? An SAR or an SRA? No. say anything that matters. No, it's like how to spot an ethnic person.
Of all the things, I know, right?
It's like it's like how to spot a left-handed person. Well, they look in the eye this way and da 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 da, and it's like I think that's one of the biggest psyops. Is just how they're cool. Because the systems that maybe we won't even say like.
I guess there's an emergency alert. Sorry about that. They're listening to us and they did this right at the right time. Sorry about that, but no, continue.
No, that's probably just my guides being like, or that's probably spirit rather being like.
it's just an amber alert, but no, I agree with you. Not a lot of people realize. Jesus. All right, enough here. Come on. Okay. Anyway, sorry about that, but no, I think you're absolutely right. That is a psyop, 100%, because, one of the biggest things that I've seen, at least in my experience, I'm sure. I mean, the CIA got to all of these people very early. I mean, one of the biggest things nobody talks about is how in the early 50s, on how the CIA got to like authors like Hemingway and things like that, because they wanted these. They wanted the CIA to have a positive spin. They did not want to be known for all of the egregious things they were doing, and that they still continue to do to this day. And but no, I do think that is one of the largest psyops. I would have to agree with you right now, is that they're trying to make all even things like the CIA and the DoD seem cool. Exactly as you were saying.
Yeah, and so with that, it's maybe because I just see how. Okay, like I just did my Mandela effect video and I saw a bunch of comments in there about how I don't even know what anymore. Whenever I quote comments, they're like not even quotes. They're more like the comments, and there was a large percentage that really thought the Mandela effect was them effing with us. And I'm like, okay. That is like so disempowering. That is like so like not what a sovereign person. It's just like, so there is this layer of reality where we give everyone way too much power and go, they did that, they did that and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I mentioned one of the three major ways that the Mandela effect is like perceived as being retrocausality. And then I don't go into it because once again, when I'm trying to edit a larger point, it's like, am I really going to go into the military industrial complex? So I'm like retrocausality, because even that could be our higher selves, retrocausality. Retrocausality could be beneficial beings from a higher density. It could also be negative beings from a higher density. Retrocausality is so many different things. It could be its own episode that I would need to make. So I just put like retrocausality. But beyond that, they have like this like front. And so I'm sure on the front, people who even work for them at that layer of it would look around and they would go, those people online, they don't know anything about us or whatever, because they don't know anything about the deeper nature of them. So I'm giving them credit and I'm being generous here by saying there's a front, because I truly don't think it's as paranoid as everyone about the Mandela effect. Sometimes I think we over conspirize everything. So I do feel like there's like an organic front going on, right? And I don't even care to justify what that is, but I'm sure. Now, beyond that, there's clear SRA abusers out here. They were light workers. They came in with that contract to, that was their mission, to go expose that. And then you have those people who are literally victims of SRA talking about the deep connections through all of these different circuits, implicating them. And then by the time it gets to the spiritual mainstream, I won't say the mainstream, by the spiritual mainstream, we water it down. We water it down so much to where we pick and choose which parts, which departments were a part of that. And it's like, I don't even know what the question was anymore, but they are deep in the most satanic stuff. Did that answer it?
That's good. That's good. I wanted to ask you because I agree with you. I think we over conspiratize. Over conspiratize a lot. I'm with you on that. And have you ever seen the documentary Kymatica? Have you ever had the chance to watch it? So it's a very early. It came out in like 2008, 2009. It's came out with Esoteric Agenda and Zeitgeist around that period of time. But one of the reasons I love it because it just stated your point exactly on what you were saying. Because yes, we do have the powers that were the parasite class that take advantage of our predicament, but ultimately we have allowed ourselves to get here. And that is the whole premise of Kymatica. If you have not gotten a chance to see that, I highly recommend. I think you will love it. It definitely sets that point because we're always so quick to blame something external from us. And in a lot of ways, like I'm not saying there aren't these things that take advantage of what's going on. I do think there is a degree of it, but there's an organic aspect to it. 100%. And I mean, ultimately, it's almost, I've talked about the reciprocation with you before. It's almost a reciprocative relationship. Yes, they're taking advantage of the current situation, but we're allowing them. We're kind of like almost like rolling over on our backs and sticking our legs up in the air, ultimately when it comes to this. So I'm with you on that, and I agree, and I think that's something a lot more of us need to realize.
Yeah.
For sure. Don, do you have another question for Miss Sarah over here?
I do, but I'm actually going to shift because in your video about the Mandela effect, it actually inspired another question. You were talking about timeline shifting, and is that something that can be achieved like in a positive manner if the collective frequency changes? Because you were saying that timelines are related to frequency. So if, say, a collective of people like the 100th monkey effect, basically, if we all got to an emotional frequency, would it change reality to that timeline?
I mean, I could just answer your question, but
That's no fun.
We like the fun side of things here. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, it would, but it would have still a plot to how to. So it would have like this unfoldment. So it would look like an unfoldment. It would look like, oh, this happened. And then after that happened, we would see the timeline in motion. So like, for instance, I'm still paleo, but I recently got really pissed because I found out the makeup I was using. My sister told me that they test on animals, and I'm like, wait, I didn't know that people still do that, but I did ask them a year ago, and they said no. And she was like, no, so then I had to spend time to figure that out because I was getting mixed signals from all the research I was doing. So I was like, okay, it seems like they pay third party, but only in China because China has laws to animal test. You cannot sell your products there because of that law that you have to test. So I'm like, okay, so it's not all the time. It's just here and it's by a third party. So all this stuff. And then I was like, I'm not okay with this paradigm. I'm not okay with this paradigm. I know I still eat meat, but I'm not okay with this paradigm where we are still in a collective sharing space with other people where I'm okay with other people making different choices and being different versions of source, but I have to draw a line somewhere when it's like, okay, like really animal testing still? I thought we were less barbaric at this time. I didn't mean like the whole world, but like I thought like, like US was less barbaric, and I thought we were all trying to create an image, even if it's trendy, it doesn't matter, of having ethics. And so then I thought, you know what? Like I want to somehow, I don't know how because I don't care about makeup, but I want to somehow change this. That whole story I told you was just to get to that point, because the timeline shift now where that happens is still based off of people going, whoa, 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 no. And then going, okay, what's the next move? So
Mhm.
we're still going to be taking those actions and they're still going to be playing out as small steps or whatever, but you won't see the level of oppression, and you won't see the level of pushback and the level of the house always wins, resistance is futility, all those different like themes that cathartically we process in earlier stages of awakening. You won't see that when you're in the magician frequency. And the
Mhm.
funny thing is that like I'm saying all that I'm mad, and then I look at myself and I go, you have power. You actually can like at Dior and say, so disappointed, so disappointed. I expect better of you. Because now I'm starting to realize that like not pointing the sword can get more done. So now I'm learning how to like do things in a way where like you can still have ethical change, and it doesn't have to be done by like being an adversary, but like just shaming people.
Mhm. It's true. It's
My
like
new
that.
method.
Shame. That's no, that's I'm listening to what you're saying. No, that kind of, so when you were talking about the animal testing, that's, so there's a few things that don't jive with me, and that's one of those things. And almost kind of made some emotions kind of come up too, because like, that's innocence, man. Like, it's part of this reality that I look at, and I try to gain, like, and try to gain compassion and understanding for those who think that's okay, but it's a very hard thing for me to do, because especially when, to me, animals are a very divine expression of source consciousness. They're a very innocent expression of source consciousness. And it's one thing, because you were saying you eat meat. I still eat meat too, but I try to always source my stuff from the most humane places, and I do a pretty good job at that for the most part. But I'm with you on that. I think that's something that kind of brings us back to the human in us. Like when we see something like that. And especially because Don and I both have dogs. We're dog owners and things like that, and we know that a lot of this animal testing happens on dogs. So no, I that definitely brought up the feels in me on that one for sure. I can understand your frustration in trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and so that's the beauty of it. So a timeline shift would be we're already at that frequency, right? So now we participate in the unfoldment of that reality. And that's why, I'm neither here nor there about emotions being negative or positive. They're,
Mhm.
like I'm not somebody who's going to say they're not negative, but I'm also not going to be here and say the advocate of negative emotions either. Like
Mhm.
they're information, and it's good to know, that one is lower than the other and why and those things. So I'm not going to like just wash away the quality of them. We need to have discernment with these types of things, but also the the importance of the whole emotional scale is that that goes into the frequency. When we're talking about
Mhm.
like a high frequency timeline, that is still constructed even with the support of lower frequency emotional states or whatever have you. And that's the true magician, the true ability to take the lower and use it, transmute it into the higher,
Mhm.
transmute it through something. And so could you imagine? I would not want to be in a reality where the men particularly did not feel angry if I was being harmed. And what if they were like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm sorry, but you're, like you just have to be more loving. And what I'd be like, could you? So anger is healthy depending
Yes.
on the context, and it's not healthy and it's super toxic and destructive depending on the context. Everything is contextual.
Mhm. And I would agree with you on that, because I've always said this. I do think anger has its place, because a lot of us who have opened our eyes and have come into our awakening, a lot of times it's been through anger. We've understood that that we've attached an identity to a illusion, practically something that we've identified with this societal Maya, I'll call it. I don't like using the Matrix anymore. I try to use Maya because I think that resonates a little bit more. But we've attached this identity to this societal Maya, and it's everything we are. And then when we open our eyes to understand that we've attached everything about ourselves to this illusion, something that at least isn't the real reality, in that aspect, that can cause anger, and so I feel like but it's the attachment of the anger, it's the hanging on to the anger. As you were saying, the magician takes that lower frequency and he transmutes it into something higher. And I think that's what we should be looking to do when we enter. Of course, we're gonna, and it's a huge part of Eastern tradition that when we're in these intense emotional states, we're actually closest to the core of our divine nature. So I mean, that to me, just basically everything you said, it makes sense. I think that's what it is. It's the holding on of the anger. It's the letting it fester. It's the allowing it to continue in the vibrational state that it is in, as opposed to transmuting it into something higher. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That is true. Alchemy is on all scales when we're looking at alchemy from the emotional body, when we're talking about it at the personal level. That is alchemy at the most closest level to us. It's being able to use our perceptions and our emotional body not against one another, but create that heart mind coherency between them, to where they're in a positive feedback loop. They're when we're open to that information, we're integrating, we're embracing, we're being present with that information. It feels supported now. Now it can better even provide information to us. A lot of times during a session, when I'm working with a client, it's really not about either men or women. I notice this is, some issues are more like men based and some issues are more female based. This issue that I'm talking about is something that is like a human issue. Everyone pretty much that at least I attract, kind of like I see this issue with, and that is willpower not giving accurate information, because the willpower and the intuition are in union with one another. They work together. And if the willpower feels pressured to give false information, then the intuition cannot properly guide us. So it goes in a feedback loop to where like the willpower has to be. And so the willpower is one of those episodes that I have built up and I have put on too high of a pedestal. It needs to come down, because every time I'm like, you need to talk about the will. You talk about this, you talk about that, you talk about that, but then you don't have the video to point to it that would really bring it home and bring more cohesion. Because I always say in this video, like I've needed for 2 years a will video to point to for my other videos. And I just, some topics I build up too high on a pedestal. And so the willpower has so many different like facets of it. But one of the facets of it is that thing we were talking about earlier, the heart. And when we're speaking to our heart, or we're even receiving what our visceral body, our emotional body has to say, it's through the heart portal. And that actually is what helps dissolve the paralysis, the judgments, all of the different things that are blocking the willpower. So the willpower needs that type of practice. It doesn't like need it, that's the only way, but that thing we were talking about earlier on how to speak to our body, that's really what helps the willpower feel like it can genuinely give you correct information, because it has so many judgments about it that it gets lost from its truth, and so it cannot properly give the intuition truth. It's so compressed and frozen.
That was a very good explanation. Thank you for that. No, and I think when we're a lot of people, I understand what you're saying about putting will on too high of a pedestal, and I think what you just clarified is that we have to have almost kind of a breakdown and an understanding of it in order to utilize it properly in our alchemy. And that's definitely something very cool, Sarah. And thank you for explaining that. Don, do you have any more questions?
Yes, the one I wanted to get to was, what is the difference between gnosis and cosmic consciousness?
Gnosis can be a verb as well. So gnosis and cosmic consciousness at one layer of reality can be interchangeable terms. But then gnosis has a way of meaning more than one thing. So gnosis can mean that, but it can also mean the mechanism that you're tapping into cosmic consciousness as well. So gnosis is very dynamic. I did a video on it, and then I could probably even do another video on it, just because there's so many different facets to it. The way that I find it easiest to communicate about it is it being, you have so much communion. The word communion meant a lot more last year. I have found that as I teach using that word with gnosis this year, that it's lost its potency or its helpfulness. So another way of saying it beyond communion would be, gnosis is intimacy with something. So I believe it's French, there's these different ways of saying no. Connaître. It's like you can say connaître meaning like you know someone, and then you could say it, and depending on how the word was changed. So basically there's two words for to know. And that's because one of them is replying to like knowing, and the other is replying to like know someone, like do you know someone? Mm-hmm. And that's what gnosis is. Gnosis is basically all of that roundabout to say that gnosis would be like if you walked into a room with two other people and then they said, the sky is green, and you went, no, it's not. And then it's like, how do you know that it's not? Look at all these papers that say it is. Look at this movie. Look at this documentary. Look at all this stuff. You'd be like, no, I know that it's not, because I saw it and I have a connection with it. I have my own intimate relationship with it, which is what I'm calling communion. Communion, the reason why I felt that word was so potent last year was because I was thinking of you taking something and putting it so close to you that you were in full like marriage or like communion with it. You were unified with it in like a holy like connection. And that's what gnosis is. It's when you go like, okay, well, I don't care what that book said because I saw it with my own eyes, or I'm getting it with my own thing. So gnosis means that, and that like, if we wanted to, we could look at everything I just said as like a verb. So gnosis is a verb, but then on top of it, it could also be interchangeable with cosmic consciousness itself.
Very, very cool. Very, yeah. That was a great explanation. I actually have so this kind of is a question from my own research, and I want to get your thoughts on this because, I've been very much exploring, the subtle body over the past year, and cultivating my subtle body. So, kind of drawing back to your esoteric explanation of the soul and the spirit, how we talk about how you were saying that we are these individual currents in this sea of consciousness. That to me was just great. But I mean, do you feel potentially, because we are these subjective focal points of the divine, we are essentially have everything that's without us also within us. Do you feel that when we look at a lot of these esoteric symbolism and the symbolism and mysticism, when we're talking about a lot of these, we look at these spiritual stories, these parables, we look at the 144,000. That's a great example of what I'm about to talk about. I know you've done a video on that as well. Do you feel that a lot of these stories and the symbolism could correlate to aspects of the human body? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, we have 144,000 nadis, within us. And it seems that we see this correlation between even the pyramid and the human being sitting in a state of meditation. And, we talk about these 12 cranial nerves, and the 13th one being Ophiuchus, potentially, which is the channel of Kundalini energy within the body. So, in your opinion, I mean, I know we have an as above, so below thing here. I mean, yes, I do think that, potentially these entities and all of that do exist in their own right. But, when we're looking at a lot of this stuff and a lot of these ancient spiritual books, are they talking to us? Is this like a divine code for us to truly unlock a higher frequency and to manifest that within ourselves? Because that's what I'm starting to see. I mean, they even talk about the Freemasonic key, and how the human body is actually potentially this key. So I don't know if in your own research, if you've potentially made that correlation, that a lot of this, Christ and the 12 disciples, the all of this relates to aspects of the human energetic system, or potentially these energetic systems that exist within us, that through certain practices we can cultivate to manifest ascended consciousness within us. And that's something I wanted to ask you last time, but I never got the chance to. And I'm just curious if you've made that correlation as well. I mean, it could be just many of one correlations. Don't get me wrong, but I'm honestly starting to think there might be something to this, and I definitely want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And so the fractal nature of reality really doesn't stop fractaling. It doesn't stop. And to know thyself, one could say that's the great work, but at the same time, that's like, now at least you know where to start. If it's like, to literally what they were saying was the best advice ever. It was like, look at your body, and if you so know thyself means fractal.
Mm-hmm.
Know thyself is saying, if you want to understand God, then understand and study yourself. Because however you want to know God's nature, study your nature. Like, know thyself and you shall know the cosmos. And so because of that, it's both. We're so deeply fractalized that on the smallest quanta scale, we'll have all the information of each scale above it and so forth. And so because of that, you're right. And then what I would just add to that is that it's both. They're trying to tell us something about the self, and then also about the above.
Thanks for clarifying that, because it's got me to the point where I'm about to start making what I was going to call a map. Almost, I'm about to start going through a lot of my books again, and I'm going to start really kind of putting my nose to the grindstone with it, because I think you're absolutely right. And we have to, I mean, even kind of pulling back, to the Gospel of Thomas, the kingdom of God is within you and without you, and like that is I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Getting to know yourself is getting to know the divine, and getting to understand that a lot of this numerology kind of correlates to energetic systems in the body, and it's just it's a very interesting thing. And I had to ask you about it, because I'm sure I had the feeling you've come across that, and you've kind of probably dived a little bit deeper than I have on it, which I'm going to be trying to catch up to you here shortly on that for sure.
Well, the funny thing is that whenever we're talking about like black magic or things like left-hand path, and that's its own thing, because not all of the left-hand path was negative. That's why I don't think in this age left and right-hand path are helpful. I don't think they're useful ways anymore of explaining things, because in that case, as a Gnostic, the right-hand path would be super demonic. But the left-hand path, these just aren't correct categories. But a large thought form in the left-hand path is to focus more on the body. And then from just a neutral standpoint. So this isn't coming from right-hand path.
Mm-hmm.
If you just neutrally look at the fascination and the magic and all of the, you know, the technology, which is the tantra of the vessel, of the physical body. When there's an over fascination or over fixation on the below, then that's when you start seeing a lot of those types of practices that are crafting things that fall under the category of black magic. That is not saying not to do them. That is not saying that they're bad. That's just, once again, I'm coming from a very neutral perception. When there's an over fixation, an over fascination with that, you start seeing that become the worship focal point. And then, of course, that's why I don't think the left and the right hand path are useful terms anymore, even though there's people on those paths. So I'm not going to make a video on it, because if somebody's on that path, you can't be like, sorry, I made a video that said these paths aren't useful anymore. Like, I don't care. It's not, some topics just aren't worth it to make. But then you'll have like right-hand path esotericists that get really fascinated, super fixated with the above, and particularly with an external savior figure. So the reason I'm just pointing this out is because please continue and please map it out. Please, all of that. I was just letting you know one of the strong attributes of people still practicing that path, because
No, and I appreciate that. And, you know, I agree with you, because I come from a neutral standpoint. I try to stand outside of the dualistic box as much as possible. And, you know, I have my moments where it looks at the lid opens up and it's like, hey, remember me? And I'm like, yeah, I do. I'm gonna keep standing on the outside. Thanks for that. But you know, but at the same time too, I think a lot of it, you know, a lot of the negative connotations of things that we still deal with. I mean, I remember talking with you last time. Someone told me that Kriya Yoga is evil, and I had to have a long conversation with them about why it's not, and how it's dramatically improved my life in all areas and made me a better person. And I'm like, if you think that's evil, I think you need to check your moral compass. But I think what it is,
spiritual yoga there is.
Yeah, no, thank you. I joke that it's like, you know, because how we're now entering the age of Aquarius, that the age of Pisces is like getting dragged now, because it's holding on and it wants to not let go of its grip. You know, when it comes to a lot of these esoteric concepts, because, you know, in the age of Pisces, at least from what I know, was the age of these organized religions. It was the age of these mediums between man and the divine. And now we are in this age where we don't need mediums. We don't need priests. We don't need any of this stuff anymore. You know, we are fully capable of having a divine experience without any kind of medium. And, you know, of course, that threatens power structures and control structures, you know, because we know how churches and a lot of other different religions are essentially in and of themselves a control structure. I just think, you know, that's part of like that energy dwindling out, you know, when we kind of see people still kind of compartmentalizing things into absolutes. You know, this is either absolute good or absolute bad. And, you know, one of the biggest things I say to people is like, well, how many bad situations have you been in that have had a silver lining? And we just kind of look at me like, and I'm like, well, how many good situations have you been in that have had a caveat? And then they look at me too. So I'm like, I think, you know, exactly what you're saying. So it's good to look at this from a neutral standpoint, because we can learn from it more. We can intake this information on a better level, because we're dropping these preconceived notions, these expectations. And, you know, when it comes to, you know, our spiritual evolution, we have to leave those at the doorstep, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm glad you dig it. Don, do you have another question for Sarah?
I could ask her about 100, but I don't want to keep her all night. So I just appreciate her answering as many as she has.
I answer any of them, I feel like I just went on tangents. I want to be helpful. Could you give me one more and give me one shot at being helpful?
This is why we like you, though, Sarah, because like we like that you don't answer the questions directly, because we learn and we listen and we're like, okay, cool. So no, we dig it. But Don, I'm sure you have another one.
My sister.
It's okay. That's the one thing about a lot of us who have kind of come into our spiritual evolution is we're like this, and it's okay.
It's a little weird. So the next one was, at some point, will those of us that vibrate at a higher emotional frequency become almost imperceivable to those choosing to stay in a lower emotional state?
I wouldn't use emotional as the marker or the measurement
Of
I would use
frequency.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You figured out my Achilles heel. So all you have to do is say frequency. And I'm like, yes. But it really is. So, anyways, yeah, that's exactly what that timeline video that me and Mark did, a collab, Mark from After School, was
Oh, very
emphasizing.
cool.
And when we emphasize something, maybe other nuances get lost, and I might have flattened the complexity, and we never want to flatten the complexity. But I've watched that video back a few times, and I can definitely say that I did say, I mean what I said, and I don't think I flattened the complexity. I said healing. I purposely said specific words, and those words were not substitutable. They weren't like, if I said heal, a lot of people were plugging in different words and then fighting that argument. And it was like, no. That word that's not even my whole point. That will change the whole context. The reason why I'm bringing that up to match this now is because there really is, and I don't mean to sound evangelical about it at all, there really is a spiritual science to the frequency domains. Being, you could look at it, I love the illustration of curriculums. I think that is the strongest and clearest and most accurate way of perceiving that, because whatever we infuse on top of what's happening can become so crazy and fanatical that it loses the potency and the truth and the essence of it. And so when we're not looking at things from like heaven or hell perception, then we're able to get down to like the spiritual science of how beings that are in a positive feedback loop, I just mean positive feedback loop right now, in the explanation I was talking about, is like using the magician archetype, or we could even look at Hermes, because in metempsychosis, which is the Pythagorean mystery school teaching on transmigration of the soul. So mystery school teaching, sorry, a Pythagorean mystery school teaching about this process really emphasized spiritual practices like the sacred secretion, which I did a video on, as you know, but I felt called to actually leave the part where it's coming from the manger into the optic chasm, or the crucifixion point. I felt very called to leave that part with no instruction. If you see any video on that, they'll tell you semen retention. And they'll probably say semen retention 5 different ways, because they don't know Jack from Jill. So that's all they know how to say, a buzzword, semen retention, semen retention. I felt very called, because a lot of the practices from past ages, we need new initiations, but there's still some strong templates within those. So not everything needs to be, the wheel itself does not need to be reinvented, so to speak. So I got called to leave that part blank, so that the person can invoke their own sovereignty into how they interpret having, a spiritual 3 days, having a high vibratory spiritual 3 days. Okay. But anyways, the reason I'm bringing that up is because metempsychosis is literally a teaching that teaches how the sacred secretion is like the Hermes archetype. And the Hermes archetype in this case is robbing, going below, robbing, because Hermes, as you know, one of his main attributes is crossing boundaries. He's a boundary crosser. So because of that, he gets equated with the thief or tricking boundaries. So in this case, there's a twist with the Pythagorean mystery school like shift of what that means. And what that means when, because remember, it means more than one thing. So when we fractalize Hermes, so when Hermes is now an archetype inside our physiology, what that's doing is stealing from the lower worlds, from the carnal energy that would have gone to physical, materiality, ego, base consciousness, and now taking that and transmuting it up into spiritual essence. And so that process, in whatever way now that we can, I'm not saying that practice, but that process of raising the frequency, becoming the magician or whatever archetype you would like to resonate with that has actual like sometimes we think too theoretical about shifts or higher frequencies or what that implies, right? But then why does anybody go to the gym? When we make choices, they have consequences that are physical. So I'm trying to make this as like dignified as possible. And this concept creates a positive feedback loop to the brink of our perception of dimensions. We already are experiencing that heavily with Mandela effects, right? People who are of the same frequency still don't have things perfectly aligned. Universe is kind of like, seems legit. Like, so it's not even about two people who are at resonant frequencies being like, wait, when is the universe perfectly in one reality, right? And I'm not talking about when we're like gaslighting each other or we don't remember, so we cover our tracks. I'm talking about like genuinely we had different outcomes and experiences. That's happening even within people who are in resonating frequencies and who are walking in the same direction, so to speak, towards awakening. So imagine the Mandela effect type outcomes we would see from positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops. And now instead of feedback loops, let's take those names off and just replace that with frequency.
There you go. Okay. One thing, you know, since we're on the topic, I've got to, that's something, you know, one thing I want to say is when you brought up the Hermes archetype and what you were saying, I got a little bit of goosebumps from that. That was, you know, that because I've always kind of resonated with that archetype throughout my spiritual evolution. And, you know, while we're on the topic, if you're comfortable talking about that, because, you know, that's, you know, a lot, there's, I feel like you could help with some clarification because, you know, when you were talking about, we'll just call it the retention, you know, at this point, but, you know, the retention, I mean, do you feel that's a beneficial process for a man, in their spiritual evolution? I know coming from a woman, I mean, you're just giving, you know, your insights and your opinions on that. But, you know, as somebody who, you know, also kind of sees those videos sometimes in my feed that'll show up randomly in my YouTube feed and things like that. I mean, do you feel that's something beneficial, at least in your opinion, for a man to practice if they are trying to cultivate themselves spiritually? I think so, as well. I do feel that way. And for the sheer fact, I mean, if you look at the occult significance of bodily fluids, and even a lot of Buddhists say that one drop of semen is equivalent to 1,000,000 drops of blood. So, you know, yeah, I'd definitely like to get your thoughts on that and a little bit of clarification, at least from your perspective, because I know a lot of guys kind of scratch their heads and wonder if this is actually something that's worth attempting.
You know, this is crazy because sometimes it's not until somebody's talking to me that then I actually get the collective hit that this is a huge asking.
You just got that hit because it is. A lot of people wonder, yeah.
How the hell? a lot of people going through a spiritual awakening want to know about. So, like, how am I going to start that intro?
I had to. We're already on the topic, and I had to roll the dice. So we had to. I was just curious because and I'm even curious for women too. Even though women, they don't do what we do per se. Women are more portals for life. But is that also apply to women in that department as well? Well, I'm curious.
This all brings up very, very good things. So first of all, we'll start with women because it's easier. Or men, sorry. And men's harder. So let's start with the harder one, the men thing. So women have been programmed and blocked in specific centers more so, and that we're all blocked everywhere, but women have been blocked in specific centers more, and men have been blocked in specific centers more.
Mhm.
And I think it's very important for men on the spiritual journey to practice semen retention because of their sex drive being targeted. Now we're in an age where something that I will be making a video on, and I have no problem with, is updated divine masculine video, because
Awesome.
the masculine men are being targeted to both extremes. They're being feminized on one side. And I'm not talking about my twinks, my organic twinks. I love you guys. But I'm talking about like not.
I know what you're talking about. I
I
gotcha.
don't know if you guys know what twinks are, but that's an endearing term for me. But like,
No, we know, yeah, for sure.
okay, like men who like that's not their nature by nature, are being
Mhm.
feminized. And then on the other end, they're being over masculinized. So men are being controlled in both polarities of their masculine energy, which is why I really love Paul Chek. If you guys are looking for, you guys are it already, but if you're looking for like an example of the prototype I'm talking about of like healthy masculinity, it doesn't need to look feminine at all. He's like a powerhouse of father, like archetype. He's archetypal, if you ask me.
Okay.
But anyways, I'm just saying that because like when I was a personal trainer, I was this close to becoming a Chek Institute practitioner. I bought the first course
Cool.
of videos. I was learning that, and then just aliens. So that one always wins.
You got to have the hair sticking up, and you got to have the look when you say that. But no, continue on. I'm definitely gonna give him a check out though.
Yeah. I'd say though, like I like the direction of your esoteric studies. So definitely you have your own path. I don't think you need, like pointers or guides, but I'm just saying, like, if you want to check someone out that is a healthy male archetype, that's not feminized and is not over masculinized in a controlled way, like a truly sovereign being. And so because of that, semen retention is so, so important for a man to reclaim sovereignty over his biology, because men have that harder. They do. I know you guys know that, but I'm letting you know I know that. I was, as I said, a personal trainer, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was told by the guy who had the manager of the gym, like, go get a weekend certificate and I'll train you personally. So I was like, okay. So I went and I got a weekend certificate, and I came there and he was like, all right, good luck, And so I didn't know how to train people really. I was learning with the people themselves. So the group of guys who worked there kind of took me under their wing like a wolf. So I was doing everything wrong. I was like, like how they trim down in the summer and they get big in the winter. Like I was like doing everything that is like not for a woman. And so one of the things was like they were like, oh yeah, and so you take this steroid, and that lasted 2 weeks. That lasted 2 weeks, but I know why I had that experience. It was actually spiritual. It was because for 2 weeks I got to see just a little bit of what the heck goes on in men every day.
Mhm. I would, yeah,
You
that's
guys,
that's a good perspective.
you got, I know that I had that experience to be like, what the heck? So it was so uncomfortable.
I
So
can imagine.
yeah, so semen retention is so important for and in the Taoist tradition of Taoist alchemy, they say not all the
Mhm.
time. They say it's not even useful all the time. They say enjoy that. I believe the Taoist alchemy ratio of retention versus release is more like retain 3 times and then release the fourth, or
Mhm.
or something like that. So it's not abstinence. It's not like strict and like opposing your body and its instincts. It's not like that. Instead, it's literally done in a very constructive way to help a man be able to reclaim the sovereignty of the biology blocks, but also I'd say the targeting going on, because
Mhm.
there's you guys are organically having that go on. So there's the organic, right? But then on
Mm.
top of that, it's exacerbated. It's totally targeted in on, and it's so many different ways that men are being programmed into the lower centers and to stay stuck in this lower centers and have no true sovereignty.
And and you brought up a very valid point, because as somebody who goes to the gym too, who's been lifting for a long time, I've experienced that kind of same thing. Like, hey, if you want that extra edge, here it is. But no, it is. It's almost as if, one of the things I see in our spiritual community a lot is I see almost like men kind of torn. A lot of them, and not all of them, but some. A lot take that, what I would call the over masculine approach. I almost got coerced down that path a few years ago. And then, some take like the what you were saying too, the feminization approach. Like they almost sacrifice their divine masculine in a lot of ways in order to kind of and I think really I brought this up on the show with you before, but maybe since we're getting a refresher, we could talk about it. I feel like when we look at the wild masculine energy, that's what I would call the balance between both sides of that. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I think that I think women need to be rewild, and I think men need to be rewild. And I think that it for a very important reason. And there's so many, but so I won't get into them. I'll only get into one really important reason, and that's because women control the mating process in a heterosexual dynamic.
Mhm.
I didn't make this up, I guess. Um, so so because of that, you need a wild woman, or else if they're not like a wild woman, and I'm not talking about like social engineering version of feminism.
Mhm.
I'm talking about like a healthy, wild, sovereign woman.
I know
Because
exactly what you mean.
because if they're in the control of those dynamics, they will urge a man, they will encourage that wildness. And if he doesn't need that encouragement because he's already wild, then it won't be something where they're like trying to tame it, diminish it.
Mhm.
So you need, and let's be more pragmatic. So I love wild because I'm a poet, but let's help your viewers like understand what we're talking about more. We need
Absolutely.
people more like sovereign. We need like more sovereign women and men,
Mhm.
because that actually controls like spiritual eugenics as well. So if you have women who are, picking or selecting partners, because I know, I'm so sorry if that's like an oversimplification of the process, but
No, you're all good.
if you have like the women looking at all of the other peacocks and then seeing which one's feathers they like most, what's controlling what's the most like advantageous quality of those feathers, like
Mhm.
what is it that's being attractive. So because of that, it takes both of them to be in their sovereign and wild, because that's what's going to also in a way, in a roundabout way, like train either train the male to be a specific way or encourage the male to be a specific way. So it's like an entrainment that goes on, from my understanding of it, which is probably why I opted into being gay this life, so I didn't have to deal with that shit.
Yeah, you lucked out on that one because no, it's definitely it's an interesting process. No, and that's a good way of understanding it. It really comes down to the sovereignty aspect of this all, because that's something, as the struggles that we face in the society. I also see the struggles as a man. I see the struggles that women face too, and I do agree with you that I think a lot more women need to come into their sovereignty as well, because one of the things that I see, and this is just my perspective, like, and from what I've seen, I'm not blanket judgmenting anybody when I say this, but I see a lot of women who are very upset right now. But what's funny about it is, at the same time, they're putting on a pedestal the very thing that's upsetting them subconsciously.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I've always had my confusion, because a lot of women, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with them in this aspect, that this system oppresses them, and or that's how they feel. And I mean, I can't disagree with how one feels. I can have my own sentiments about it, but at the same time, they put this very system on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And they feel it's oppressing them at the same time. And that one is, I've always tried to wrap my head around. And I kind of always have to take a step back and be like, okay, I'm gonna let this one kind of cultivate itself the way it's going to at this point.
It's cognitive dissonance. That's why I'll always be fourth way. I'll always be fourth way, because the fourth way teachings they get to the heart of it. Once I got out of them, I was like, that was rough. But now I look back and I'm like, it wasn't rough enough. Everyone needs fourth way, because I just agree. I truly agree. Like, we could get into the higher mind. We could get into the creative being. Even in Hermetic, or in Hermeticism, it's called the stellar man and woman, which is focused on not making you your peak enlightened, perfected self the way mine is. It's about understanding your perfected higher nature while still understanding that it will be a unique fingerprint of it. So it's not like getting you into this like singularity version of oneness that sometimes people equate with higher states. Instead, the stellar man is a concept of getting you to your most truest spiritual and authentic self, while already knowing, they already knew that you couldn't, even if you wanted to, if I'm talking about if it's true light, not false light, you couldn't, even if we wanted to make you the same as someone else. So there's this inherent uniqueness. And with that, but the process first, before we get to these higher things I'm talking about, you have to deal with your cognitive dissonance. So what we're seeing is women playing that out, or whoever is playing it out, whatever group is playing it out. And I'm over here just going like, whatever you think you are, you're not. Until you go through a process of inner work, or I would consider hopefully fourth way, but that's asking too much. Until you meet your internal dissonance and deeply integrate that, so that you can make sense, so that you follow a trail within yourself and go, wait, but I'm against that, but I'm for that, but then I act like that. Like, it's all dissonance. That's why it's like, I liked how savage Gurdjieff was. He'd be like, you're not even real. And I know that sounds, but that's also very compassionate if you're at that level, to shock you. So the work was also very, one of the tools in it was to shock. People need to get shocked.
well, because you're absolutely right. Because when we travel outside of our comfort zone, and we do get that shock, ultimately that begins what I would call a rewriting within ourselves, a rewriting of our frequency and our energetic structure, because it's a lot of, like you say, the universe has no chill. That's why if you've been stagnant for a while, and the divine has been giving you little hints and signs. And, I'm a huge believer that, the divine speaks through us, not always in a literal sense, but through symbolism and through emotion and through scenarios and feeling. It then will be like, okay, I've given you enough chances. I'm going to pull the rug out from under you and we're going to see how this goes. and that's kind of what it is. But no, sometimes we need that shock. So, it does. It causes growth. It brings us into that place where our energy is shaken up and now we need to reintegrate it. And then when we reintegrate that energy, we come through further remembrances. So yeah, I totally think that's a beneficial process, even though it sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah. And how I would tie this in, because I swear I want to answer your question about semen retention, is one of the benefits of it is that when that Hermes thing happens, instead of going to the lower worlds, it gets stolen. It's getting stolen because, as you guys might already know this, when it's inverted, when instead of being released, it's held through that conscious internal process, that retention process, actually, it gets transmuted into now regenerative energy. So you can regenerate yourself with it.
Absolutely. No, and I've heard that because, when you look at the principles of it, because because of the amount of life force that contains, the amount of chi that fluid contains, if you're transmuting it into your body, it's almost as if that it causes a very profound healing effect within us. And I even think so on an energetic level. From what I've experienced, I'm not going to get into too much detail, don't get me wrong, but it helps catalyze. It does something different. 100% it does. And I think, if my biggest thing I would say to people is, give it a go, because we live in a society right now that the dopamine response is everything. And, I was actually talking with Diana about it too, who you were on the show with last time, Transcending Ascension, on how, yes, government's one thing and, the powers that were one thing, but, food is a huge thing because now food has become correlated with the dopamine response. And it's that quick, instant gratification, the same thing, going that route. And it is reclaiming your sovereignty from the societal Maya. I completely agree.
Yeah.
So Don, do you have any more questions for Miss Sarah? I know you had quite a few, and then we'll kind of start winding down for the night.
Actually, I can add in on what you guys were talking about there, because I also went through a gym phase. Unfortunately, at the same time, I suffered from a Napoleon complex and went on that anabolic adventure. And I'll say it quickly: if you ever want to experience puberty again, give it a go, because it sucks.
Dude, it lowers your IQ too, man, because when you it gives you a brain fog. I've never done it, just on from people I know who have done it, but it gives you, because when you jack your testosterone up beyond like super physiological levels, it gives you a brain haze. It almost kind of like dumbs you down a little bit.
You're the dude. Like, and the best part of my whole experience with that is that led into a wonderful case of muscle dysmorphia. So like there really is no pleasing the ego, no matter how big you are or strong you are. Like, I'm 5'5" and I was 200 pounds of brick shithouse. Right. And I had to like roll back and forth to get out of bed. And I looked ridiculous. And I still thought I looked like I was 110 pounds. So it made no difference.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And I, my thing for that is like, it's self-love. It's self-love. It's, kind of what we were talking about here. In this world, we're shown what I would call extremes and illusions, and they're presented as reality, in fact. And and what happens is we get caught up in, we start thinking that these extremes and illusions are reality, in fact. And what this does to us is, we start holding ourselves to these unrealistic expectations of, what we think we should be, or what we think we should look like, or how far along that we should be in this kind of particular journey or path that we're taking. But, the number one thing is understanding that the thing that helped me get out of that was understanding that you're being the best version of yourself, and no one else can be the best version of yourself. And that's you're not going to look like people competing at the Arnold Classic, because they're on tons of steroids and things like that, but you can be the best version of you, and it's about finding that happiness in that, and not looking at the extremes and illusions. I'm sure Sarah agrees that we are presented with a lot of extremes and illusions
Yes.
as a reality quite frequently, and they're starting to ramp up even further as we kind of move towards would you say this period of time, because I've brought this up with you before, and then we'll wind down, but our conscious collective, right? People who are in the spiritual community or in the truther community, I mean, I feel like, yes, we're being presented these extremes and illusions that are being presented as fact is part of this very strange alchemical process that we are collectively going through. And that's the best way I put it. And another thing, if you could touch on real quick before we wind down, you and I were discussing this weird kind of time thing that we think is going on at this point in time. On one of the last episodes, it was we were talking about history, on how you've kind of stopped paying attention to that, because you feel there's some interesting time thing going on, and or some weird kind of time trap or spiritual trap, if I'm correct. I mean, I'm just kind of going off the cuff of what I remember. Have you dived in any further on that as well? Because I've been diving in a little bit further, and I'm starting to kind of get convinced that something like that might be the case.
Yeah, so I've gotten, for as long as I could remember, that the perennial system of the yugas is not. It's funny because I haven't done a yuga video, and it's like that would be a perfect topic. I know all about them. I've even been, that's how my mind has been trained to see things through the yuga cycles. So I'm not fully against the concept of octaves that you evolve in, that just makes sense. So I'm not against that, and I wouldn't say that the whole concept is not correct, but at the same time, I feel, when my issues when I feel into it, has always been the same. It's been that there's more, and it's being almost framed in a way. So it's not that you don't evolve, and that's alchemy. It's like going through densities. The yogic cycles are densities. You could replace yuga with density, and so Dwapara Yuga, which is the one that we're entering, would be the fourth density. So they're just large the curriculums that have to do with form. So because of that, the general concept, it makes perfect sense to me, and that would even be a part of the ascension process. It's more like the thing that I have an issue with is, once again, it's the actual way that it's being presented to us and how time is being presented to us. Because as you already know, I still stand by that, that I do feel that there's a time loop happening where there's I'm trying to look for the correct word, but it's an exploitation. I feel like there's an exploitation of humanity happening. So it's something that we're naturally doing, but that it's being exploited. So, and that exploitation is the problem. And so then I believe after that, we were talking about Ashayana Dean's work and stuff, which I've been getting into. Yes. And I'm not going to die on that hill yet. I'm not going to just believe that Metatron is just because she said it, but I'm open, and a lot of people aren't even open. So I'm going through the material, and there's a lot of stuff I'm super impressed with her ascension mechanics. And then there's a lot of stuff that are plot holes. They're flat out plot holes. So I don't know when I could ever say that this case is closed and I could have a final understanding and answer around her, but she will be able to consume a lot of my time here on Earth, and that's what I'm thankful for.
I'm with you on that. I've been getting into the bio spiritual healing. I think it's really cool. Actually, me and Diana started looking into Ashiana Dean after we spoke with you about it, and it is very interesting. And the perspective of Metatron, the one thing I'll say about that is my thing is this: I when I look at things like that, I mean, I try to only keep a basis of the divine consciousness and my higher self. Any kind of extra entity or any kind of extra energy. I'm not saying it's least in my it's not a bad thing to explore and potentially work with, but I think right now we're dealing with, you said, some kind of exploitation 100%. And I think that it would be wise to have discernment when we're looking at a lot of these energies that were previously thought as potentially beneficial, and for our own well-being. And because that I've seen a lot of that come out lately about how Metatron is not as good as that he was once portrayed to be. So it's something to think about for sure. A couple of things I want to add. I think you'll chuckle at this comment, Sarah. So Sovereign Cosmic Wild Man said, "I know, sis." So this is something that, and then we have Canadian Spinja. She says she appreciates your tangents because not only do you answer the question, you also offer other points that many of us newbies don't think or know to ask. So definitely, we're gonna close out with this, Sarah. Again, it's always a pleasure sitting down with you. I walk away. I'm over here taking notes on my notebook every time you're talking because I'm like, all right, this is something I need to look into. But honestly, like, the coolest thing about you is ever since I started watching you, I've seen you evolve in your own way. And I've seen, and something Don and I were talking about before the show is, I've been on my evolution now. Shoot, I feel old, like almost 17 years at this point. And, there's not a lot. Thank you. I appreciate that. And, not a lot of people, there's not a lot of people I used to listen to that I can take anything away from anymore. Like, I feel that, yeah, it's not that it's a bad thing, it's just that they're kind of still where they are, and that's what's meant for them. And but you're one of the people who, when I listen to you, I can always take something away. And thank you again. I know I've said it before, but thank you for everything that you do and what you've done for this community.
Wow. Every time. I'm just so grateful for that reflection. It means so much to me because this is what matters to me. So when it's received like that and I'm getting to see the benefit and that reflection, and like, thank you so much. And I just have so much love for you, and I hope that you continue to grow, and your platform continues to grow, and your voice and your everything about you guys. I just have so much love.
Thank you so much for that, guys. Well, so real fast, before we head off, Sarah, if you don't mind sticking around for just a sec after we sign off, I have Don's links for After Dark Show and March 4th Productions in the description of this video. I also have Sarah's links. I have her Instagram, and I have her YouTube channel. And I did not know you had a podcast. I need to listen to this. Oh, I thought you said you had a podcast earlier. My bad. I must have misheard you.
She was talking about podcast appearances.
Oh, okay. Podcast appearances. I was like, oh man, I need to catch up on some episodes. I was like,
yeah.
oh wow.
Oh yeah, no. I meant like when I'm on someone's podcast.
Okay, cool. But I have Sarah's YouTube channel. So guys, if you want to take a sec, if there's any other place we can check you out, Sarah, aside from your YouTube channel or your Instagram, if you want to let everybody know.
Yeah, just my website, thealchemist.community.
Awesome, awesome. And Don, as far as you, anywhere else anybody can check out After Dark and March 4th Productions?
Just on my social media and Instagram and Facebook. And no, this has been absolutely amazing. And Sarah, on a personal note, thank you for giving me the ability to understand what's going on in the universe that surrounds me that I just woke up to.
Oh, thank you. I'm doing my best. And, we all have our own perceptions of it too. So that's a part of sovereignty as well.
And it's a beautiful thing that it's that way. And I think that's something that, we have to take a look at even further, because, one of the biggest things I've been hammering hard is we need to stop arguing with each other as a community. That's the number one thing. I mean, you even talk about it in your comments on your videos, and I see it all the time on social media. Yeah, and my biggest thing is this, and I'll close out with this, is, guys, you're giving the powers that were exactly what they want when you are arguing with people in our community, because they want us divided. They want us angry at each other. They want us not working together, because ultimately we're collectively spinning our wheels at that point. So just remember, everybody's awakening is precious. Everybody's journey is beautiful. Everybody might have a different philosophical idea than you, and that's okay, because the one common thing that we share is that we are all on our own spiritual evolution, our own spiritual spiral. And the reason why I call it the spiral is because you will sometimes be brought back to previous things to learn new lessons. And it is always ascending, and it has no ending destination. All righty, everybody. Thanks for joining. Did you like that? You like that? Cool. I'm glad you appreciated that. But all right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on BG Cast After Dark. I will be back next week. Don will go back to his normal programming, but of course, Don is always welcome to hop on here whenever he wants with me and to chat. And next week, I will be having the Brothers Blue on with Andrew Lordson, Heavyweights Light Feels. So we're going to have a very interesting conversation next week on the 23rd. Guys, have a good night. Thanks for joining us, and take care. And thanks for hanging out with us this whole time.